Hello and welcome back to the EMJ Gold podcast, brought to you by EMJ, your number one open access destination for HCPs and pharma globally. Hi Jade, welcome back to another episode.
Thank you very much. How are you doing today, Isabel?
Very good, thank you. Looking forward to sharing the edition today. We've got something a little bit different. We're going to be diving into a recent article that was actually penned by Jade. And it's on a topic that really affects us all, which is memory, retention and recall.
Yes, specifically how healthcare professionals prefer to learn and how the industry can create education that actually resonates when it matters most. It was a really fun article to write, actually.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And we're very much excited to share some of the insights with you today, because ultimately, what is the point of medical education if it is not memorable? So it is really key to stand out and make an impact. So we're going to go over a couple of theories around how to do this today, aren't we?
Absolutely. And according to that research, interactivity could actually be the key.
Indeed. That's going to be coming up quite a few times in this conversation. Let us explain a bit more.
So I think we should start with Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve here. This is a concept that highlights just how quickly we actually lose new information when we learn it. Studies have shown that without reinforcement, we actually forget around 50% of what we learn within a day, and then 90% within a week, which is shocking. It's a really huge challenge for effective learning, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I was shocked to read that stat in your article and found it really interesting what Ebbinghaus identified as the 4 key factors that influence memory retention. So we had the strength and relevance of information, the time since learning, how it's presented, and also our emotional state, which was fascinating. So in simple terms, content that's engaging, well-structured and personally meaningful, and especially that is reinforced over time as well, is the information that's most likely to stick.
Absolutely agree with you there. In my article, I actually highlight how traditional, more passive learning methods can sometimes not work hard enough to actually combat that natural decay that Ebbinghouse's curve relates to. So it just opens the door for new approaches to actually do better in this realm, potentially.
Absolutely. Whether it's a medical education article, video or infographic, being innovative or perhaps interactive, as we're going to discuss today, could massively help HCPs quickly assess information that's most relevant to them and really get to the heart of that content. But we will go into the full impact of interactive in a second.
I imagine so. But before we do dive into the details, I do want to touch on another big learning challenge that interactive content can actually help solve, and that is information overload.
Yes.
Something that we hear a lot about in pharma. There's so much content going out, and especially as digital channels do become an increasingly popular way to reach HCPs, it's quite an important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing about information overload is that we hear it as a buzzword all the time, but we very rarely think about the science behind it, what causes overload. And I found it really fascinating in your article. You talked about a theory from John Sweller, which is called the cognitive load theory, which explains why we can't process and commit large amounts of information to long-term memory.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I'd recommend reading a lot more about this, actually. Essentially, Sweller's theory suggests that when people are bombarded with too much information at once, their working memory actually struggles to process it and then transfer it into long-term storage. I think it's, a natural point of life that we can all relate to as well.
Yeah, really interesting. But obviously this can apply to the volume of communication. So if you've got hundreds of emails in your inbox, you're going to feel overwhelmed and less able to focus on one. But in this instance, it can also apply to communications themselves. So making sure that complex medical knowledge can be applied, retrieved, reinforced. There is a real opportunity here for innovation, and interactive has the potential to really shine, we think. So I think let's dig into some of the benefits of that next.
Let's do it. So we've touched on some of the challenges that pharma faces when creating content that actually sticks with HCPs. But I think it's time to dive into those benefits of interactivity that you teased a little bit earlier.
Yes, let's do it. So a study published in the BMC Medical Education Journal actually found that compared to traditional lecture-based learning, interactive and case-based approaches significantly improve clinical reasoning and knowledge retention. Something that you said in your article.
Yeah, exactly. No surprises there. I think that makes complete sense. Interactive content allows the reader or viewers to actively engage with a case or a problem. So you're not just memorizing facts on a page or applying them in real time. And I think that process of application is actually what makes the knowledge stick, is the difference between reading about how to ride a bike and then actually getting on one.
Love that analogy, Jade.
I made it especially for you as well, our resident biker.
Makes a lot of sense. And not only does it work, it's also something that HCPs want. So, in fact, in another article we published last year, EMJ's chairman and former surgeon, Dr. Jonathan Sakia, commented that medicine has been taught by the Socratic method, with the teacher probing their students who respond and provoke dialogue. And we remember those interactions forever because of their very nature.
Exactly. I think that's a really great quote to use there. And HCPs are so used to being probed and tested before they even enter the field, so it's completely relevant. The real shift for the industry, I think, is leaning into this new approach to education. It's quite a big shift, but retention is so critical for doctors. And if you want them to prescribe your new therapy, then they need to ultimately understand its value. So if interactive learning can help with that, it does feel like a bit of a no-brainer there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting when you look at what types of doctors most prefer interactive content. We're actually working on an infographic, which is looking at our own data, which will be coming very soon. But I know in the article you looked at some data from Avant Healthcare about this topic.
Yes, they published a very interesting study and report, actually. I didn't quite manage to fit all the information into the article itself, but they actually broke down the different types of content preferences by therapy area.
Interesting, yeah.
So yeah, it was really interesting insights to read, and it actually found that interactive content ranked among the top 3 preferred types for dermatologists.
Dermatologists in particular?
Exactly, yeah. It does make you wonder why.
Yeah, I think there's so many reasons, and I actually think this will become really popular in every therapy area, but perhaps the reason it started off being so popular in dermatology is that visual aspect of that therapy area. You really need to be able to understand and see these conditions for what they are and differentiate.
Yeah, possibly. We've certainly noticed a lot of interest from companies working in the dermatology space as well. So if you do want to check out our most recent interactive article in dermatology, we'll leave a link for you below.
We will, and I think it is really crucial to do that, because I think the capabilities of interactive really do need to be seen to be understood. We've all heard of interactivity, but knowing how it actually works in the medical context, you really do have to see it firsthand. From quizzes to clickable carousels to interactive data visualizations, there's loads and loads of options. So yeah, if you are curious, we'll leave the link for you to check it out.
And as we have been discussing, if HCPs can be engaged by content, the more likely they are to retain information and perhaps even change their practice, which you hope would benefit their patients. So it's a win-win really for HCPs and the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. Now, everything we've been discussing is all well and good, and while interactive medical education is amazing, we can't get too ahead of ourselves and say there's no space for traditional education or traditional formats anymore, can we?
Yeah, we're not advocating for a full-scale revolution just yet, maybe in the future, but it's not really about choosing one over the other, but about finding the right balance, I think. And traditional static learning still has its place. It's always going to have its place. But especially when we consider all the HCPs who are accustomed to those methods, I think it's really important to keep those in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And, interactive content does cater to various learning styles. That's something we've learned is a real positive of it. However, it might not be the right fit for everyone. So a practical solution could be to do both static and interactive versions of the same content, just to see which resonates best with your audience, because you never know.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And at the end of the day, it's not just about innovating for innovation's sake. I think we all see a fun new toy that we want to play with, but it's really about ensuring that complex medical information is actually communicated as effectively as possible to as many HCPs as possible as well.
And fundamentally, we do think interactive is an amazing vehicle to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe the future isn't about replacing one approach with the other, but actually blending both to create something truly adaptable, engaging, and ultimately more effective. Hybrid models do often seem to be the winner in many medical contexts these days.
Yes, absolutely. And I think with technology constantly evolving, of course, and HCP preferences shifting with it too, the hybrid approach that you spoke about there is definitely something the industry should start considering, maybe. Hint, hint.
Yeah, one size fits all is rarely the way forward, I think. But with that, I think that's everything we wanted to cover, and that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you very much for listening to us today. We will share those links in the show notes. Thank you for the chat, Jade. Thank you for the article. Very much looking forward to being back with you next week.
Same here. Until next time, though, it's bye from us.
Bye.